Hey everyone, welcome back to another edition of Outdoor Hospitality Weekly. I'm Alex Burkett, joined as always by Matt Whittemore. And Matt, we've got a little bit of a loaded docket again today. Since the last time we were together, we talked all about some different acquisitions news from, folks like Great Escapes RV Resorts, Northgate. We covered the Under Canvas story, lots of stuff moving and happening. And I think the same holds true this week. But before we dive in, just how have you been?
Busy, good. I think we're in an age and an era of the world is changing day to day and just trying to keep up and stay. I don't know if I can say I'm trying to stay ahead of the curve, but trying to stay not too far behind the curve, I'll say. So good. It's good to come back and have these conversations, and it's a lot of fun to just with all everything changing so quickly and a lot of moving pieces. This is like almost like a grounding exercise of like, a checkpoint of be a little bit you know just kind of review the progress and take a deep breath and take a beat and chat with my bud in the business. And
Yeah,
you
I know
know
it's a nice respite for me, especially on the grounds day to day, park wide. Obviously, you're overseeing a lot of stuff on the real estate and acquisition side, and again, a lot of this news will certainly, I'm sure, tie into what you're seeing over at Unhitched and Climb and what's happening in the market. And yeah, this is always great for me to step back from one single resort operation in Michigan, as we're looking to continue to grow at Grayson and get a second park here in Michigan. So always nice to look at the market activity, and we'll get a little tech corner here at the end as well to talk
for
about some
sure.
some cool stuff we're doing internally.
Yeah.
So why don't we kick things off? What I think was probably the story of the week, so to speak, as far as it was the biggest piece of news that I think either one of us saw, for our one big thing. So Blue Metric Group, somebody I don't know that we've had a chance to talk a ton about. If we have, it's probably been a few months and been a little bit since I think they've been in the news in a major way like this. They purchased a $97 million portfolio comprised of 7 RV resorts in 5 states, all of which are kind of in that Sun Belt region from Virginia down to North Carolina. A lot of those parks were, I would say, similar size to things that they purchased before. I would say averaging right about that 200-ish mark, a little bit less, maybe a little bit more. Um, this is something that they're looking to bring in-house under their in-house property management, arm of the company. And this was acquired, by Park Brokerage Group. John Sheedy and Andrew, two brokers over there that you and I both know well, who've been in the industry a long time, kind of put together this off-market deal. And this has been something that I think has been in the works for a little bit, but finally, closed this week. So obviously, when you're getting to the point where, Matt, I'll let you kind of speak on this first, but when you're getting to the point where any portfolio of size is being closed for right at about $100 million, it's a serious deal, in some major way, and especially to get not that many RV parks and resorts, right? I think six in this grouping, so six properties
Yeah,
for
the seven in this one. Yeah.
seven. Okay, seven for about 100 million. That's a sizable chunk of change per
Yeah.
per park. So, do you just want to kind of add some more detail there, fill in the gaps, and let's talk about just kind of what this means?
Yeah, so this was announced by our friends there at Park Brokerage. Big shout out to John Sheedy and Andrew DeHone. They have been working on this one for a while. They actually represented Blue Metric Group. They represented the buyer, which is not super common, really, in commercial real estate or in campgrounds in general. So I thought that was a really interesting tidbit.
Mm-hmm.
Shows that
Yeah, and
they're
especially
active
that
in the
obviously
market.
this was again an off-market deal, and them coming to
Right.
represent the buyer. I think that's kind of unique.
Yes. So yeah, this was, like you said, a big deal. These are more resort quality properties. This was a really kind of under the radar portfolio and operator, at least in my opinion. And I'm someone who prides myself on kind of knowing all the players in the market and databasing them. And this one was not on my radar. I'd come across a few of the parks, and I think it always kind of caught my attention of like, what's like, who is this, what's going on here? RV Management Services was the seller. not to be confused with RV Park Management Services,
Right.
which they're also our friends over there. You know, when we first caught wind of this, I first conflated that, and I was like, no way, RV Park Management, is selling. That's crazy. And that's not the case. Totally different operator, different group. Definitely under the radar. Really nice set of seven properties that sold. They own nine altogether, so two did not transact. Um,
Which that's a little interesting, I think. I wonder if, obviously we're not, on the buy side to get the inside details on that, but you'd be curious if I'm sure again, selling the majority of the portfolio, you'd probably, if you could, have liked to have maybe gotten rid of all of them, in one foul swoop. So I wonder if they just weren't as much of an investment grade asset as maybe the others were.
yeah, it's a good question. I don't know the answer to that. Could be seller's wishes, could be buyer's wishes. Maybe those were two really nice legacy assets that they never wanted to sell, or I don't know. You never know. But yeah, this is a rare transaction because, right, how many portfolios out there are there of this? This is kind of a one of one portfolio in a lot of ways. There's others that are similar, but those are typically groups that are in acquisition mode, not sell mode. And it's just interesting. And there's always rumblings from the investment banking world and the private equity world of the appetite for these types of transactions. And now one's off the board, so it's slim pickings to go around.
I was going to say one that I know we have talked about, especially being, I used to work here and I'm familiar with the company Spacious Skies, of course, having,
Yeah.
15 parks kind of in a similar, area of the country. Of part of that portfolio is right in that North Carolina, Georgia, Virginia base. So
Yes.
kind of interesting. It's all right around, at least partially, in that same area on the East Coast.
Right. Yeah. I mean, this is a different product, though, I would say.
Of
Just
course.
you look at, I think this was around $65,000 per site on the sale. And right, I think Spacious Skies is a similar number of sites, but twice as many parks.
Correct.
More,
Yeah,
so
a lot more traditional campgrounds rather
yeah, more
than kind of that resort
campgroundy.
model.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, similar markets, and so we have another transaction to talk about, and we'll definitely subscribe to the newsletter. We'll be writing about this on Saturday. Um, really interesting transaction, I think, for anybody in the market, something to study and keep an eye on, get to know those parks and add them to your comps database because there's not such a small niche. There's not many comps like this to go around. I've been close to a somewhat similar transaction. Again, similar number of parks, similar number of sites, vastly different economics. Uh, and what I'm talking about is a creative, sort of a little bit distressed acquisition that we've been working on at Climb Capital, and now Unhitched is operating the properties. And that was the Beyonder portfolio that we took over management of in July. That was actually right as I joined Climb and Unhitched, and that was kind of my first, view into what was going on, was seeing what it was to take over management of that six property portfolio that needed some operational, rework and improvements, and good properties, good teams, that have been fortunate to work with through Climb and Unhitched. And then it turned from pure third party management in July into an acquisition. Essentially, just acquired the operation itself of Beyonder on November 1st, and it's been an adventure, honestly, in a lot of good ways, a lot of challenging ways, for the whole team. But we feel really good about the direction of where it's going. That was about a similar number of sites and about a quarter of the dollar amount. And I think that just shows you how wide of a spectrum there is of types of campgrounds, RV parks, outdoor hospitality. It's really mind blowing, honestly. Even somebody that lives and breathes this every day, it's just always a reminder that no two campgrounds are the same. Every campground, RV park, outdoor hospitality property has a supremely unique business model, financial makeup, value, right? We assign cap rates to things. And honestly, that doesn't even really make sense in our business, right? You can benchmark things, of course. We use operating expense ratios and NOI margins and rev pass, revenue per available site and occupancy rates. And we benchmark things as is like human nature to want to do. But in a lot of ways, there's really no benchmarking our industry. Every single thing has a unique fingerprint on it that, yeah, you can put some guardrails around it, but it's just, it's super unique, and every single thing is its own living breathing, organism that's one of one. So it's
Well,
always
and it's
fascinating.
that yeah, it's that interesting point of, and we experienced this a little bit here of like, what is that true comp set? It's something that, we use CampSpot, great hat, and plug to them as, I use them on a daily basis. But, um, in doing reporting and in comparing that, there's a comp set that CampSpot has in there with a lot of the analytics reports that we're compared against. Well, most of the parks that are within that even just 20 to 25 miles of us operate completely differently. We're pretty much the only resort style campground in a very, small, immediate area. Gets a little bit better when you approach Grand Rapids and things like that. But yeah, I mean, even locally, it's hard sometimes to compare apples to oranges and what that looks like. So, yeah, certainly across portfolios and things like that, there's a lot of differences at play. I mean, with the Beyond Deal, obviously the locations are very different. It's not as a compact a portfolio as the one that we're seeing here from Blumetric Group, right? A little bit
Yeah.
all over from Indiana and Iowa down to Louisiana, right? That's a pretty spread, mix of sites and locations there. And just as you said, a different operation, right? There's some kind of resort style parks in the Beyonder portfolio. I think the Louisiana location being maybe, one of them that feels a little bit more resort like. And then you have more
Yep.
of the traditional campgrounds in the Midwest, in Indiana and Iowa. So it's always just interesting how you comprise a portfolio, how it kind of comes about. One question I had, Matt, and obviously, you can speak on this to your acquisitions experience. How do you actually source a off market 7 park portfolio like this? As you said, how many are there? How obviously you came in kind of at the tail end of the Beyonder one, but would be curious to hear too. Like how do those conversations look? Because it's different than us going and trying to buy a single park from either a single owner or somebody like that. That's a way different process, I would imagine, than trying to work with another institutional group that's looking to sell.
Such a good question. And it's something I think about all the time because we do have such a small niche that it just reinforces and kind of exaggerates the importance of relationships. I got my start in real estate investing with small multifamily properties, and what was appealing about that was that any little town has a handful or more of these buildings, and as a new investor, as somebody who's inexperienced, not advocating for anybody to like jump in when they don't know what they're doing. Definitely learn, but you can stub your toe and make yourself look like an idiot in front of somebody who owns a 3 unit building, and you offer too much, and then you realize you offer too much, and then you look like a jerk, and you're retrading them, and all the dynamics of being an investor and acquiring these types of properties and businesses. You On the flip side, you can't really do that with campgrounds, right? There's only so many groups or owners to go cold call. They're going to remember you. You can you could sit down for 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 4 weeks and cold call every campground owner in the country that right fits your buy box. And that's what I always remind people and try to keep top of mind. So knowing the parties involved here, right? We look at Park Brokerage, obviously very well known brokerage, John Sheedy, Andrew DeHone, uh, great relationship builders. They know everybody in the market. So right, they've just built a great foundation. Same with Blue Metric Group. We've gotten to know them a little bit, and John and Zachary over there and their acquisitions team, and they're very active. They're movers and shakers. They've been on quite a growth spurt for a few years now. This
Yeah, I
gets
think what
them
Matt launched in 2021, 2022, somewhere in there.
just
Blue
around
Metric
there, yeah.
Group. I mean, yeah, that's an incredible, probably getting to a couple $100 million in campground deals at this point, especially after the $97 million acquisition. That's an
Yes,
incredible growth trajectory in just,
I,
call it 4 years.
yeah, I think they're close to 40 parks now. And so they've obviously been making a name for themselves in the market. They've got a really great marketing operation, kind of on the investor marketing. So I don't think there's anybody that's in this space that doesn't know who Blue Metric Group is. And right, so two very prominent figures there. They probably knew they probably knew the portfolio before they knew it was for sale. And that's kind of the game here, right? That for my approach on acquisitions, my philosophy is the North Star is to know every park in the country, right? And we're working towards it, but that's what and this will kind of dovetail into the tech conversation, I think, a little
Mm-hmm.
bit. But right, my goal is to have a list. It's an oversimplification of it, but it's a binary kind of list of here's all the parks that I would ever be interested in acquiring. Okay, one just came up for sale. Is it on the list or is it not on the list? And like that sounds crazy to somebody who's investing in small multifamily buildings and there's, or mobile home parks or self-storage facilities where there's 50,000 of them across the country. It'd be really hard to know a 50,000 piece database like the back of your hand. But if we're looking at 200 site plus parks that generate $1 million plus in revenue, like is there 2,000 of those across the country? Probably not. Probably not even 1,000. If there's less than 1,000, that's a database that over the course of a year you can know like the back of your hand. So that's our approach, and I know that's I don't know if they'd articulate it the same way, but that's generally similar to Blue Metric Group's approach. That's probably similar to most brokerages in the space. And then you look at the other transaction too, right? Bob Preston, obviously very well known figure in the industry. So I would, I know for a fact that, he knew the owners at Beyonder, been in touch with them. And that's the argument for the management business. It's a good business as it is, but as an investor, it creates an awesome funnel and
And that's what I
pipeline.
was going to touch on is that
Yeah,
dynamic between kind of the in-house management, which obviously, we do with me on the ground, you guys do it at a larger scale with that. Also do third-party management for
right.
other folks who don't, that the acquisition is not tied in. And I think, as you pointed out, Matt, it's always good to be known as a buyer or somebody who can, there was that step with Beyonder, right? To come in, start with the third party management and then kind of leverage that and use that to grow that into an acquisition once you've got a better handle on the operations, et cetera. The other piece that Matt, maybe you can touch on, is I know Unhitched has been involved in doing some of this too, is the rebranding piece of this. Obviously,
Yeah.
Blue Metric Group has Streamside, a kind of a little bit under the radar consumer brand that they're launching at a lot of their parks. I'd be curious to see, as you know, I'm the marketing and branding guy, what they're going to end up doing with this group of 7 parks. Are they going to
Yeah.
keep them as is? Are they going to rebrand and kind of bring them under Streamside? I think that that's something that more and more groups, especially with resort like operations, or I would say operations in great, places and metros, are doing more, where it's just, it makes more sense. We've seen, Great Escapes do this. Blue Metric Group, of course, Unhitched doing this. Beyonder did it back when they were buying parks. They, changed the name and brought that into the portfolio. So there's an
Right.
interesting dynamic there of do you keep the existing name, do you not, and how that all pairs together with, in-house and third-party management. So can you speak on that a little bit? And then I think we can go right in from third-party and in-house management into what we're using tech for
Yeah.
within the management as well.
The branding is such an interesting challenge and conversation. It's been top of mind, I know, for really the whole team at Unhitched and Climb Capital, right? We have the Unhitched RV brand, but it's a lot of work and it's big decisions, right? You're picking the logo, you're picking the word mark, the colors, you're branding it, and then it comes time to spend like $50,000 on a park sign. And you're like, do I really love this logo? Do I really love this color?
Right, I know.
Right, it's what's the right time to do all that? Do you do the vinyl banner as the interim, and then how long do you let that hang around? And the naming of it, and how it ties into the website, and the architecture of your website. It's just a never-ending
Well, and
chain
it's that
reaction.
race to compete with the Jellystone and KOA, right? Who have these
Exactly, yeah.
iconic, amazing brands, and obviously Unhitched trying to do something, like that, and say we're going to build a consumer brand that's more, you know, hip and cool, and kind of ties the whole portfolio together. So yeah, it's very interesting, and um, yeah, it's a challenge for sure. A lot of money at
Right.
stake. I know even on the, I this example popped to my mind of even it's Blue Compass RV, right, on,
Yeah,
totally kind of separate, but them doing that and literally spending hundreds of millions of dollars to rebrand their hundreds of locations across, the
yeah.
US, going from, I think, what they were, RV Trader was the prior name, and in making that upgrade and that change. It's a lot of capital at stake. And yeah, Matt, how do you balance that too? In addition to saying we could take all that money we're spending on all the branding and all the stuff, you could probably use, if you totaled it all up, that might be another park based on after the
Yeah.
signs and the logos and uniforms and website and marketing work. It's a lot there.
It is, and it's a really big decision that you try to be deliberate about. And each, as we discussed, a few minutes ago, that each park is unique. So each park has its own unique branding needs. So you're trying to you're there's a push and a pull, and there's competing kind of goals and desires. On one level, you're trying to speak to the consumer and let them know that there is a brand standard here, that, right, you go to a KOA, they have their three different tiers, right? Journey, holiday, and resort. You know what you're getting in each tier. That's pretty well thought out. Jellystone, very similar. I mean, totally different business model, but similar in that you know what you're getting when you go to a Jellystone, and that's what we're trying to work towards. But some of the portfolio is monthly RV sites, full time RVers, right? It's kind of more of a community of people who live there than it is a transient resort. So it's just such an interest. And then we're doing, some development of some really truly resort destination properties. They do have some long-term sites, but that's a vacation long-term site, not a home long-term site. And it's so challenging, right? I think we're reaching that scale where it starts to mean something to the consumer, and we're starting to see
The
customers
cross
say,
marketing, right?
exactly,
Too,
yes.
especially with you guys so focused in the southeast, and I would say other groups that have done that kind of rebranding have, I think, had similar advantages, right? Even within where you guys are, you can pull somebody pretty easily to go from a park in Florida to one in Alabama to up to the Carolinas, and people are making that journey and may appreciate the customer service and the hospitality that Unhitched has, and that ability to cross market, I think, is one of the
Yeah.
largest advantages that you get from doing something like that. And as you said, makes way more sense on the resort style where you're looking for that person who's kind of seeking out the next stop with the family and trying to visit cool destinations, rather than somebody that's just looking for that spot to be at for the next year, where it doesn't really matter as much. You're more probably looking for locations first. Like that was more about buying the park right and running it well, and maintaining a really good operation there with good margins all around. So yeah, it's a really really interesting thing. And yeah, it's been interesting to watch you guys do it and look, and as we look to say, hey, would we want to do something like this, getting a second park in Michigan? Does that make sense at all to try and pull somebody to different destinations in different areas? So
Yeah.
marketing and tech and all that stuff has been top of mind, I think, for everybody. As we've talked in episodes past of portfolios like this really dialing in and focusing in on operations. We're seeing a little bit more of this move and that capital open up again. I think with some of these deals, if it works and you're building those relationships, and when the time comes, you're able to capitalize. But as we're gearing up for the season here, Matt, it's February. For us as a seasonal operation, we're getting ready to open in a couple months. Obviously, Unhitched has a lot of properties that are open year round, and we've both been trying to use artificial intelligence, automations, all kinds of different things. And we're using some different systems and have some different applications, but figured we would, do a little bit of a tech corner today. I know you and I have talked about kind of, promoting this and talking about what we're doing on each episode coming up for a little bit here as we play and,
Yeah.
learn some really unique and cool stuff. I think there's application out there that can be, used at a lot of different parks across the country. So why don't, Matt, I know, I've gotten a lot of insight from you just off camera as we've been talking about this. I'll let you kind of start and tee up this conversation however you want about, what you're using it for. What are some new things that you've been learning and playing with that are making your life easier? And then certainly I'll talk about what we're doing here and see if there's a little bit of, cross commonalities between the two.
Yeah, for sure. And I think where you'll bring a lot more tangible insight is through the actual campground RV park operations piece of this. But really, my whole kind of AI existence has been, until now, or until probably 2 months ago, entirely through content creation lens, right? I've always enjoyed writing, and I still do. And right, it's kind of a touchy subject for people about, using AI as a writing tool. Um, you
You're not
know,
writing a novel though. I mean, this is
yeah.
I think an important breakdown.
Right. And so that's been the primary lens. But it's a good lens in that, right? I spent a year learning on ChatGPT. Really, 2025 was uh, learning how to prompt engineer, and then diving into custom GPTs. And then in probably the beginning of Q4 2025, I started migrating everything from ChatGPT over to Claude, and then getting into Claude projects. And that felt like an epiphany of like, oh, okay, this is a different world. And then I quickly discovered Claude Skills, which, Claude Skills is essentially like a mega prompt, but way more dialed in with a set of instructions and then a whole set of reference files. So it's kind of like a little bit like a custom GPT, a little bit like a mega prompt, and a little bit like a Claude project. But it's what it really is a workflow. So if you do anything repetitive where you're producing uh, a document or any sort of output, a skill is a great way to explore that. So I've spent a few months learning, building Claude skills, using them, refining them, having great results, trying to sharpen the craft. And then literally this morning, right? I kind of had another new epiphany, which I've, been lucky to have friends and colleagues that are much more advanced with this stuff than I am. And I've heard it over and over of you got to get off Claude Desktop, you got to get off Claude AI and go into Claude Code. And I'm like, okay, like I hear
Not
you.
really a coder, right?
Yeah, I hear you. And I downloaded it, right? I used the Claude Desktop, which the Claude Code is now, you can put it in Claude Desktop. And like, you go over there, and then it wants you to set up a file path. And I'm like, what even is this? Like, you can't, it's giving you error messages. And I'm like, I'm motoring it with my Claude skills. I don't even have time to like think about this or jump in. And so, I shout out my bud Zoner, was on a call with him yesterday, and he's like, "You just got to do Claude Code." So this morning, I was like, "All right, I'm just gonna do it." So what I did with Claude Code was I took my 18 different skills that I've built, some context around what I do, and also like a write up on where my pain points are, and I dumped it all into Claude Code and said, "Talk to me like I'm in fifth grade. I'm new to Claude Code. This is my first time using it. I want to explore orchestration layers and automations and agentic solutions. But I am I don't know anything about any of this. Talk to me like I'm a fifth grader." And it came up with an entire super dialed in plan of how I can optimize, how I can improve, why Claude Code is better than Claude Desktop, how I can connect it to the cloud, how I can convert all my Claude skills and projects into a file and folder structure that has a longer context window. It's going to just be faster, smarter, more context. So that's my new big project, is converting all my Claude projects and Claude skills over into a Claude Code setup, which is going to be a lot of work, but I think it'll be worth
But
it.
I think, but
So
I think the efficiency, right, too, how much more are you going to be able to get out of it? How much more are you going to be able to do with it? Obviously, everybody is talking about AI and efficiency go hand in hand, and I would imagine, Matt, too. You can expand that, from content into more stuff, right? How much can that assist in the acquisitions process, or in underwriting, or in deal sourcing, and trying to
right.
help compile that database of things that we talked about earlier in this conversation. So definitely really interesting. My insights this week are going to be a little bit more rudimentary, I would think, than where you're at, but I can talk about just kind of the journey we've taken this off season, and what we're using for this kind of campground frontline. So um back when I came on board with Grayson, Justin Richards, who's our owner, he had started working with an Asana consultant. Asana, of course, being one of the top project management systems, similar to Monday and ClickUp and others that are out there. That's the one that we use internally. He was based out of South Africa at the time. He now lives in Spain. Really cool guy, James. Talked with him earlier this week, but he really is been known and helpful for helping us use Asana and the AI and the artificial intelligence to build something custom for our operation, right? So it's that incorporation of our own custom agents, right, and using different forms and automations and things like that obviously make my life easier. Just from a comms perspective, the amount of work camper resumes and applications that I'm getting in, the amount of interest on seasonal campsites that are coming, where the whole path is now automated, right? Somebody reaching out, information getting sent, follow-ups being coordinated. In Asana, it's moving kind of, throughout the list or throughout the board automatically based on roles that are set up, right? So just from that single piece, through the comms and the information and the amount of stuff that's being submitted, the time savings that I've had, just because it's just me as the GM in the off season, that's been huge. So certainly I would say with, I think both Claude can do this, Asana can do this, ClickUp, Matt, that I know you use, can do this as well. Like automate this stuff as much as possible has been, definitely a key insight that, I've seen. And then I would say, secondary to that, obviously, as we're starting to work through things like right reporting and trying to have better trackability of so many things throughout the property that we've never had insight into, in years past. Knowing and understanding what were the amount of, taking that seasonal, interest, for example, how many outreaches were there this year? By the end of this year, I want to know that number. Well, how many was I able to close through that process? What was my conversion rate? What do we need to do to improve that? What types of things and insights can we gather from that are going to actually have a tangible impact, on the operation itself. Myself and our team members run off of a management by objective system, or an MBO. So being able to build that in Asana with the goals, tying those directly to projects, and then having those automations and agents work on things for those projects that, again, move that, MBO, or management by objective forward. That's been another key thing, right? Is tying everything back, making those movements happen automatically. So for us, it's been a really cool way to have one source of truth within the company, right? Using something like this, we're going to have our team members, as they, we come back for this season here in April, they are going to start to be using this. So everything is run from a CRM, from a, project management database. It's all being run through there, which for me and for, ownership who's not on site, it's been a great way for everybody to kind of stay aligned with what we need to focus on, while building something that's, fully customized to what we need, that ultimately we'll be able to say, okay, in that workplace, replicate that. All of the custom agents that we need are already going to be built out and learning and using our data. So we're kind of pulling all of our internal data together that I can go in, ask it questions, and it already understands the park. It knows what reporting's in there. We're getting those automatic reports that are downloaded from CampSpot that go in every day, tracking things like, our occupancy, obviously, all the stuff that every other park is doing. But to be able to go in and have it understand and learn the business has been a key thing, right? That, there's not this, and Matt, you probably experienced this too, in building out the skills and how you're prompting it. You've talked about in the past trying to be that master prompt engineer. And obviously that's been, I think what starts to take somebody from a 101 level to kind of that upper level, and using and getting more out of the system, but not having to prompt it super well, right? Where it already knows everything about me and the system. It's getting new data that it's able to access every single day, that it's learning and training on. And again, there's guardrails in place that it just knows where Alice Springs RV Park, and it understands that. That's been so nice too, just from a time savings thing of being able to access that quicker. So
Yeah. Yeah, it's super interesting. And you brought up ClickUp and Asana, and both
yes,
really amazing deep tools. And now they're very much like AI first, right? And I think that's the world we're in now, where, everybody wants to learn about AI, or most people do, that are trying to keep up on tech, and it can feel daunting. And I think that's the biggest impact, which uh want to give a shout out to our friend over at Rover Pass, Ravi Parikh, actually just launched a newsletter, and I know his goal there is to kind of
share some
shed,
of this stuff.
yeah, break it down, kind of demystify it, and I know he's excited about that. So definitely check that out. We'll link it in the newsletter. And I've had a lot of good conversations with him, and he's helped demystify it for me, and just talking about how it applies to the campground world. And right, everything feels like a hurdle, right? It's weird to go, like, if you're totally new to it, you go on ChatGPT, you use it like it's a Google search engine, you ask it questions, and it's pretty revolutionary, for somebody who's new to it. And then you kind of, right, you learn about or see content about prompt engineering, and that feels like, okay, it's a new thing I got to learn. It's a hurdle. It's something in the way. I don't have time for that. And there's all these things that you perceive as hurdles, and you just got to jump in. You just got to, like, clear everything off your desk. And there's been some developments in recent weeks where, right, Anthropic released Opus 4.6, and on the same day, OpenAI released, what was it, Codex 5.3 or
Hmm.
something like that. Both overnight, both the same day, and honestly, the world changed overnight. And it's not to oversell it, but these models got so much smarter, so much more sophisticated.
And to understand that this is probably like the dumbed down version of whatever way more powerful model they're using and like tweaking internally, right?
Well,
Like that.
so yeah, exactly. And so there was an article, I think his name is Matt Schumer. He wrote an article on Twitter that I think it's up to like 100 million views. It went crazy viral. And it was an interesting article. Definitely, I think, optimized for views and engagement, but good, right? It wasn't clickbait or anything like that. But it starts off as a little bit of like a doomer article of right into to the same effect of what I just said of like the world just changed. These things are so much smarter. Like the time is now. And I feel like I was one of those people where you read about AI and you read these kind of doomer things of it's coming for your job, it's going to change the economy, so many people are going to be out of work, and I'm like, okay, yeah, maybe, but I'll believe it when I see it. That time is here. That time is now as of 2 weeks ago or whatever the release date was. And I saw it myself. I'm just chatting with on Claude desktop, hadn't got into Claude Code yet, and just three messages back and forth. I didn't ask for an app, I didn't ask for a solution. I was strategizing a problem that I was having, something I was looking to solve, and it built me a fully functioning web app without I didn't ask for an app. I wasn't even in my mind that I wanted to even think about an app yet, and it built a fully functioning web app. And I went and my wife Carrie, was in the kitchen, and I'm like, "You got to see this. This is the most insane thing ever!" Like, and she's like, "What are you talking about?" So it's the time is now, and I think for campground owners and RV park owners especially, nobody's coming, right? AI can't own and operate a campground,
And
not
that's
yet.
that's where I was going to go, right? You're free to do all the hospitality, right?
Yeah,
We talk about us outdoor hospitality and we often miss that word. And I think you and I have really tried just in the industry, through the content, through everything, tried to harp on that, right? We talk about all these acquisitions and the numbers and all this changing of hands, but it's that hospitality piece that makes us so, so, so different. And
yeah,
that, family campground spirit that should be communicated throughout every park that
yeah,
you have. And you're right, that's the thing that AI is never going to replace, but you can get something that's custom, that's tailored, that's enterprise ready, that makes your life so much easier, right? As I said, I don't have to sort through paperwork and just the monotony of compiling together seasonal info, right? I can just make the freaking touch point and go talk to the
yeah,
people who are interested in that seasonal site and
yeah,
spend my time
100%.
talking to people all day. Right? That's a
Yeah,
way better use of my time and way better for our business than trying to do the admin work in the background, just as a really
right.
simple example.
All right, so yeah, 100%. And I think one of the biggest challenges in our industry is staffing. And I'm not advocating for, using a robot where a human could do a better job. Never. But sometimes you can't find the person to do the job at the campground for a lot of reasons. And now you have another tool in your tool belt to make the people that you can find to come work at your campground or yourself to be infinitely more productive and efficient. And yeah, there's a lot of tough conversations. Like we have it internally as we see the increased prominence and effectiveness and sophistication of AI call centers and AI call agents. And that's a debate that we have internally. And I see both sides of it where, okay, yeah, we're an old fashioned campground. We're trying to have that, old world hospitality feel in a increasingly digital, disconnected, impersonal, depressed, detached world. And so like a nice phone conversation is like a throwback to 10 years ago, when the world was simpler. But at the same time, right? A lot of times you call a campground, you don't get a call back for a week. You don't get a call back for 2 weeks. One, because I think the bar is low. campgrounds are full. I mean, maybe not anymore, maybe not transient campgrounds, but right, I'm speaking of my experience of like secret shopping, cold calling campgrounds in the Northeast where like most seasonal campgrounds are full. There's a waiting list, and I think for that reason it's kind of lowered the bar of, well, I don't have a seasonal site to rent this person, so I don't need to call them back. Like, and maybe that's also a story of a tired, burnt out mom and pop owner that's been at it for 40 years, and it's probably time to think about retiring. But you can have a capable AI agent answer the phone now. They can't really take a reservation. They can't process a transaction, but like I know Staylist has the
Mm-hmm.
functionality where it's an AI concierge on email, on phone, and then if it's a phone conversation, they'll text you the payment link all dialed in with the reservation, all the details confirmed. So all you have to do is go to your phone, open the text link, and process payment, and your reservation's done. So I think soon we'll probably have live reservations on a phone, uh, and to me that's huge, right? Especially when you have monthly sites or seasonal sites or annual sites,
Or heck,
and a
after
phone,
hours, right? When
yeah,
you're
a,
closed, if
a
nothing else.
9 p.m. call that was never going to get answered turns into somebody that rents a monthly site and stays for 2 years, and that was a $20,000 call that you captured that you never would have captured before. That is absolutely transforming your business. And that's an extreme example, but how many you guys are really good about your phones. You're an awesome campground manager. You're on top of it as much as I would trust anybody to be on top of it. But how many $200 calls do you think slip through the cracks where somebody's hair is on fire to get a reservation? You've already got one person on hold. You're on the phone with somebody else, and you couldn't get to them for an hour, and they went and booked somebody else. Like,
It happened last week, and I called the person back, and quickly, to your point, and I was
yeah,
too late. They had already booked somewhere else, even though we
right,
had spots, and yeah, just couldn't get to them in time. So no, it's a common problem that happens, and yeah, there's that weird dynamic of you've kind of got to answer on the first ring or on that first call to capture that live booking. And the unique thing, especially most calls and things that you get at a campground, it's people wanting to give you money or asking questions to learn about the experience and then give you
right,
money, right? So this is all more important than ever, and something that to your point
yeah.
will have a big
And the
impact on the
bad
bottom
and
line.
the flip side of the same equation is how many bad reviews do you get at a campground because somebody called 3 times and the phones were jammed and they were just trying to get the Wi-Fi password,
Yep.
and now they're ticked off because they couldn't get the information. Like hospitality, it's the debate of like, oh, okay, it's not a personal touch, it's not a human to human interaction, it's not hospitality. No, that's an archaic view of the world. In 2026 and forward, having technology, if you want to call it a robot or whatever, having technology that gets your customers the information they want the second they want it is good hospitality. And it took me a while to come around to this, but I'm fully on board that it is it needs to be embraced. And if you want to hold out and say, you know, well, we're old fashioned hospitality, we're an old fashioned campground, you're not going to be capturing that revenue.
Well said. What a great place to leave it on. I love that. Well, Matt, I think week one with I don't know, we're tech corner, whatever you want to call this, the AI deep dive or mastermind or whatever we're gonna
Yeah,
kind of look at this over the coming weeks. I think was really productive. Like I said, even just talking to you, I've got some homework to do myself on MCP servers, how to use Asana better, and what things we can be pulling from and learning from on your end. And obviously, I'm sure there's hopefully nuggets in there that you guys can pull for your on-site operations and things like that. So think this was a really great conversation on all things acquisitions, talking about the Blue Metric Group portfolio acquisition, Beyonder coming on board into the Unhitched family, and then diving into AI a little bit, sharing some practical tips as we get into kind of the start of the peak operating season here. So with that, Matt, I know you mentioned it, but for folks, again, subscribe to the newsletter. We'll drop this first, and then you'll see this podcast after that. Newsletter comes out, most Saturdays. I think we're trying to keep that, and then
Yeah, we'll get back
podcasts.
on track with that.
I'm saying it so we remember to do it and
Yes,
can stay on track with it. Exactly. And then podcast after that, early every week. But I'm excited to be back with everybody with some great content, and see you back here in another week for some more great stuff. Matt, talk to you then.
Thanks, Alex.